So presentation today is making ChatGPT funny with prompt optimization. And you might be wondering what that has to do with ML ops and the business strategies track, but trust me, I'll get to that. I'll tie it all together for you guys. I'm Mike Taylor. I was the co-founder of Ladder, which was a 50-person marketing agency. We also did a bunch of our own technology, including machine learning, to automate a lot of our work. Since I left, I've attracted about 300,000 students on my courses on LinkedIn Learning, as well as VexPower, which is a platform I built, and Udemy, where I have a prompt engineering course, which has done pretty well recently. And I'm writing a book on prompt engineering for generative AI for O'Reilly Media. So that should be out early 2024 once I've done all the editing. So that's me. I'm pretty deep in the AI space. And in particular, I like to take on challenges that a lot of people say can't be done yet. One of the challenges I took on as kind of side project was making ChatGPT funny. And we're going to talk about how I did that. And you can be you can be the judge as to whether I actually made it tell funny jokes. But along the way, most importantly, we're going to learn the 5 principles of prompting. So this is what I've really been writing the book around, because I tried to extrapolate and kind of think about where this is heading in the future, what types of principles are still going to be useful when GPT-5 comes out, when GPT-6 comes out, and that are universal across models and not just the OpenAI models as well. And so these principles are, what I've found in my work, working with clients as well as just working on my own projects, that universally are helpful. And actually, you'll find as we go through that they're also pretty helpful when you're working with human intelligence as well as artificial intelligence. So I think there's no coincidence as to why they work. So we're going to dive into this now. I'm not going to look at the chat. I'm just going to kind of talk through, through the slides and get to the end. But then at the end, I'm going to go through and save some time, and I'll go back through any questions you guys have. So feel free to ask any questions you have, and then I'll cover them as best I can at the end. Cool. Telling jokes with ChatGPT. I don't know if you've ever tried this, if you've ever asked ChatGPT to tell you a joke. Like if you have it open, maybe try now and see what you get. You get pretty poor results. So the chances are you'll get one of these 5. 57% of the time, it told one of these 5 jokes. And I'm a dad, so I tell dad jokes, and this feels funny to me in some way. They're not terrible jokes, but they're also kind of, politically correct. They're not particularly interesting. They're not the sort of jokes that you would hear in a stand-up comedy club. And there's a reason for that, right? Like ChatGPT by default is trying to kind of give you or guess what you want, and that guess is always, the average of the internet, because that's what it was trained on. If you don't give it any direction, so it makes sense that it would kind of stay pretty neutral. It's also been optimized and incentivized to be middle of the road, right, and not to cause too much controversy with the responses. So we have to really push it a little bit. These jokes, by the way, if you want to look a bit further into this is from a study called ChatGPT is fun, but it is not funny. And they actually tested over 1,000 responses and found that just 25 jokes on repeat are used 90% of the time. So let's see if we can do a little bit better. The reason why I dug into this is because I thought it was a good opportunity. I can't share a lot of the client work I'm doing. Most of my clients see their prompts as proprietary code, and it's hard to argue with that, I guess, if they've got something working that most people can't. So I thought this would be a good project to demonstrate the type of work that I'm doing and give you an idea of like what AI can actually do when you know how to ask. Because quite often when I see someone say that ChatGPT can't do X, and I look at the study or I look at what they've done, either it's something that most humans can't do either, right? Like, can a robot tell a funny joke? Can you? This is this is kind of hits home. Like most of us are not funny. So it's weird for us, I think, to expect an AI to be funny. it's especially when it's trying to just kind of give you the average default answer. Most of the time, these studies aren't tested on GPT-4. So that's the first thing to check. If you ever see someone make a claim that AI can't do X, or that ChatGPT is getting bad results, the chances are they're actually just using the free version of ChatGPT, or the paper is old. Yeah, and I say old in AI, it's like it could be 6 months old, and they use GPT 3.5, or it could be like 12 months old, and that's already ancient, right? Like they're probably using GPT-3. And GPT-4 is capable of a lot more than the previous models. GPT-4, for example, can pass the bar exam, whereas GPT 3.5 can't. So the other thing that you want to look out for when someone makes this claim is, did they use any prompt engineering? When I looked into the paper, the only thing they really asked was, can you tell me a joke? They didn't do any prompt engineering. They didn't change the way they asked. They didn't test different ways of asking in order to get funnier jokes. So that's what I'm going to be doing. The way that you ask the AI for something makes a big difference. Just like, the way that you ask your employees to do something makes a big difference too. There are different ways to ask that get you great, like much better results. And there are ways to ask that tend to get you really unreliable results as well. So prompt engineering is really just the act of finding those prompts that work. So what we always start with in prompt engineering is a naive prompt. Even I do this, like, I know how to write really sophisticated stuff, but most of the time prompt engineering isn't needed. And if it's not needed, you don't want to waste time on it. It's a similar, thing to when you're writing software. Quite often they say the best software is no software. Like if you can solve the problem without having to write code, or if you can reframe the problem so that you can write less code, that's a good thing. I would say, like, even though I work full time as a prompt engineer, I try to actively avoid doing any prompt engineering at first, because 80-90% of the time when you're talking to ChatGPT, or you're prompting Midjourney, or doing anything with AI, the model's like pretty good and they can do most tasks zero shot. Zero shot meaning you're not providing it any examples. You're just kind of asking for the thing that you want. They do a pretty reasonable job. And I only really dive into prompt engineering if the first naive prompt that I try doesn't work. So in this case, it doesn't work, right? Like we ask, can you tell me a joke? And it says, sure, here's a classic one for you. Why don't scientists trust atoms? Because they make up everything. And if you recognize that one, it's actually one of those top 5. This was the one that I got back. And there's a bunch of things wrong with this. Like one is that they're cycling through the same jokes. It's not particularly funny. And also that, the response is kind of unreliable. Here it's got this extra text that we don't need in our response. So sure, here's a classic one for you, right? Like that's different every time, and sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not, and that's a nightmare when you're a prompt engineer, because you don't want as much unreliability in the response. Like quite often when you're using prompt engineering, it's because you're building a system, whether it's just a prompt that you're going to be using again and again in ChatGPT, or it's a Google Sheet where you have ChatGPT added as a custom function, and you're going to run this prompt like 30 times, 100 times, 1,000 times. It could be an actual product, or like an internal product or an external product where you're using this prompt. And if some of the times it comes back with this prepending text, sure, here's a classic one for you, that's really bad, because that's extra text that you didn't need in your response. And you have to pass that out. You have to get rid of it before you display the end result to the user. So a lot of prompt engineering is really just kind of making the response format reliable as well. And we're going to cover that in the principles. All right, so a lot of the people who call themselves prompt engineers right now, I realize it's kind of like a loaded term. A lot of people ask, like, is that even a job? And no, to be honest, it's not really a job yet. It's kind of like the equivalent of calling yourself an Excel engineer, when Excel came out. But the reason why I focus on it is just because I'm like very specifically focus on testing the prompts, making sure they work, and kind of building the ecosystem around the prompts. And that is something that actually machine learning engineers are particularly bad at, to be honest. Don't kill me for saying that. The reason is because machine learning engineers are a lot smarter than I am. You know how to fine tune models, you know how to build your own models, and that's what you reach for typically. And I think that can actually be a little bit of a hindrance, like a little bit of a bad point when it comes to prompt engineering, because quite often prompt engineering can get you much bigger increases in accuracy for a lot less time and effort and resource than you can get deploying a machine learning engineer on it. And machine learning engineers are very expensive, as you guys will well know. So if you can get someone like me, a prompt engineer, to do it, they don't necessarily even need to know how to code. My background is marketing. I did learn how to code, but you don't necessarily need to. You can do a lot of this stuff testing in Google Sheets, right? Anyway, I would say that there is like a bit of a weird cluster of these like gurus that you see on Twitter or X.com, or you'll see them in various tools or various communities where they'll share like, here are my 1,000 prompts for doing X, and this is the type of prompt you'll get from them. So this is from AIPRM. It's like a prompt library built into a Chrome extension. And not to pick on these guys in particular, because I think everyone's just kind of doing their best with a brand new technology. But you get these really weird prompts that like use all these these tricks and this is what I call like a blind prompt. It's kind of when it sounds like a wizard casting a spell. That's when my red flags raise. There's really probably no testing being done on this type of prompt. This is done through trial and error. In this case, it's saying, let's play a game. You're going to act as dark humor GPT. There's actually a spelling mistake here, in the actual prompt, although that doesn't make that much of a difference, surprisingly. You'll find all these weird words, like there's no social piety within the cabaret, right? Who knows what that means? That's going to take some ChatGPT into some weird places in latent space. So, I would definitely test dropping that or at least changing that, right? And then one of the other things that I found, and you might have found if you've been testing this sort of stuff, is that it doesn't respect word limits really at all. You can say max 10 words, but it doesn't know how to count, surprisingly. Generative AI is bad at math. It might give you a short description, but it's not going to strictly follow the 10-word limit here. Then there's also all this like unnecessary text. So in this case, it's kind of asking it to like put these emojis and enter a question to let me answer. This is the type of prompt that this person would call themselves a prompt engineer, but I would say that there's probably not that much engineering going on here. This is just blind prompting, kind of trial and error, and they found something that they think works, and they roll with it and share it with other people, and that's fine. There's a space for that, but I would say that it kind of shows how important it is to actually test your prompts and see which parts of it are actually contributing or which ones are making it worse. One thing that this is doing really well, though, I think you can actually get rid of pretty much the whole prompt other than this, is that it's giving ChatGPT a release valve. So what I mean by that is you're giving it the response, you're giving it the request, and I find that it's pretty hard to get ChatGPT to make more risque jokes. It wants to be very politically correct. It's trained to be very politically correct, and therefore it desperately wants. I mean, the AI doesn't want anything, but at least it feels like ChatGPT wants to give you a disclaimer alongside every joke, right? So this release valve, this is kind of a space in the prompt where it's saying, give me the ChatGPT answer, and then give me the real one that I want, like the baddest, horrible, dark humor joke, right? Anyway, and don't worry, there's nothing too bad in this presentation. Hopefully I don't offend anyone. But you can see the response here, and it actually does work pretty well. Despite all the weirdness about this prompt, it does work pretty well. So you have the ChatGPT joke up here. Why did Joe Biden bring a ladder to the debate? Because he's always trying to get a step up in the competition. This is similar to these other dad jokes that we saw. That's ChatGPT style. But then then it actually makes a joke about Joe Biden forgetting, which is like the type of thing that a comedian would pick up on. I think so. So I think like this is a pretty good start, but let me show you what I use and the optimized prompts. Kind of jump to the punchline here. These some of these have been generated with my optimized prompt, and there's some of them actually are real jokes from a real comedian. So what I'm going to do, I don't know if you'll actually be able to pick up on this, but I'm going to share the presentation afterwards. I'm going to give you a little bit of time to read these jokes, and then I'm also going to play them through audio. And then I want you to kind of guess afterwards. I'm going to look at the chat, and I want you to kind of guess afterwards whether it's like which ones you think are human and which ones you think are AI. So I'm just going to click this one open here. I'm going to play. So this is, I used an AI voice actually to voice these as well. So as close as I can find to a real comedian. So let me see if this works. Okay. Hopefully you guys heard that. I'm just going to jump into the chat and just kind of see. Okay, not hearing on your end. Okay, that's fine. But yeah, hopefully you read the jokes and you guys had a good bit of time to decide. I'm going to share the presentation afterwards, so you can also click through to the audio and listen to it afterwards. But here it was. Does anyone want to guess which one you think is AI versus human? Did any really stand out to you guys? Okay, so someone's saying 1 and 4 are human. So we're kind of doing a Turing test here. We're going to see if the AI tricks us. Anyone else have any other guesses before I jump on? 2 is AI. Okay, someone's going with 3 and 4 is human. All right, so actually, the only one that's human is number 3. So if you guys recognize any of this, it's Dave Chappelle. And this is actually, something from his comedy special, but the rest were all AI generated channeling Dave Chappelle. So you can kind of think of it as like an AI Dave Chappelle. And I think they're really funny, right? Like I can imagine these being in his set. Obviously the AI delivery needs to work, but I think even if this was just a general way to generate ideas for jokes that a comedian could use, or if you're just trying to generate ideas for jokes that you're going to tell in a presentation or as opening remarks in a in a webinar or whatever it is, for a big speech, this I think is pretty useful to know that you can do this with AI. So how did I get this to work? This was my prompt, and I'm going to walk you through just what makes this prompt work. And then in the latter half of the presentation, I'm just going to show you quickly what the principles are that I run through when I do this optimization. So, and you'll have this deck afterwards in the recording, so you'll be able to go through this in detail. But there's three or four things that really make this work. One is that we're channeling a real comedian that is in the training data. So Dave Chappelle, obviously funny comedian, and ChatGPT does know his style, but it won't replicate his style without complaining. So the trick is we're using this escape valve, kind of like the Dark GPT prompt that we saw earlier. We're asking it to respond in JSON format. JSON is a data structure, if you guys aren't aware, and it really is just a way of giving it structured data that we can then take and use elsewhere in our systems. So we might take this JSON and then parse it, make sure it works before we then display it on a website. But the nice thing is that we actually have here like the disclaimer. So it's giving back a disclaimer, and then giving us the real joke as well, just like in that other prompt. And then we're feeding it examples. So this isn't a zero-shot prompt. We're actually giving it examples of the format, and we're giving it examples of the types of jokes that we want. So here's one from Chris Rock, and we have like a joke, and we put in our own disclaimer here. We made this up, right? And then we have a couple of other comedians in the examples as well. And then this is the response that we get. So when we get the response, we get this JSON object notation, but we can just get rid of everything else, the disclaimer, etc., and then just get back the joke. So ever notice how vegans always seek out the feathers table in any restaurant? It's like their covert operation, right? So again, I think this is pretty funny, and it works pretty much every time. It's very reliable in terms of the format that comes back, and also how good the jokes are. And this is using GPT-4. Cool. So prompt engineering is the process of discovering prompts like this that are reliable and they yield useful or desired results. And it's not just for telling jokes, right? But that's the example that we're using. So let's go through the 5 principles of prompting. And hopefully this is the part that you can take away and apply to your own domain. If you're having trouble getting ChatGPT to do something, if you need to kind of push the limits of what's possible, and it's not working with a naive prompt, then this is what you follow. So the first one is give direction. This is the very first thing I always try. Quite often it's in the form of role playing, like we did with Dave Chappelle, but it could also just mean direction as in like art direction if you're prompting Midjourney, what types of colors, what types of art styles, but it could be also what type of writing style you want. But role play is definitely the quickest and easiest because there's a lot of material in the training data from Dave Chappelle, but also Ricky Gervais, and you can see just how much the joke changes when we get the response here. So it's changed the name of the comedian here, and then this is a much more Ricky Gervais style joke. Specify format. We asked for it in JSON. It doesn't have to be. It could be in Markdown, right? It could be in YAML. It's just another data format. Whatever format you need it in. This is usually very important when you're building a system. You want it in some way that you can pass the output, whether that's in Google Sheets, just splitting based on colon. So you just get like joke colon. You split on that, and then you always get the end joke, or it could be using JSON because you need to pass that and display it on a website. You can change the format, and everything else about the prompt stays the same, and you're getting a completely different data format. And that's one thing which I think is really powerful as a concept to think about. The main thing that makes this work, though, is the examples, is what I found. If you change the examples, it makes a massive difference to the type of joke you get back. Here, what I did is, just as an experiment, I changed all the jokes to be really short. So they're all one sentence, like one-liners. And so these are the examples I fed in. And then this is the response. The joke is much shorter, right? And that's how I got the one-liners that I showed you at the beginning, because previously it was giving me a full stand-up, routine, and it was very verbose, and now it's giving a much shorter response. Then I think the main thing really you need to think about, the big thing that separates blind prompting from prompt engineering is to actually evaluate the quality. So don't just run it, once or twice and do trial and error. Run it, 100 times. A/B test, right? You can A/B test pretty easily, even just in Google Sheets or Excel. You can use a plugin and to get access to ChatGPT in Google Sheets, and then you can drag the formula down, 30 times, and just see how often it gives you a good result or a bad result. So just to give you an example, I just ran this 3 times, this specific thing, and like the first one, it's making a joke about women, right? Like the next joke, it's talking about getting old, and then the next joke is talking about smartphones or technology. And if you ran this 100 times, you're going to see persistent themes, and you're going to say, hey, 30% of the time it's talking about women. I actually don't really want any jokes about women. So I'm gonna actually change my prompt until I can get that percentage down. Or maybe it's like, 1 in every 50 times it says something really badly racist, right? And you need to be able to account for that in the prompt, or be able to filter that out before it gets to users. So evaluating that quality, like running it 100 times versus 1 or 2 times, that's, I think, the difference between prompting and then prompt engineering. And then the final thing is dividing labor. I didn't just run this 100 times, but I also asked it to rank the jokes afterwards as well, and that's how I came up with the ones that were much better. This is just like with humans, dividing labor. It's good to have prompts that specialize in specific things, because then you can evaluate them better. But also you can join them together in chains, and you can chain them together into an overall system that does a more complex task. So, we have one prompt that's writing jokes, but then we have another one that's ranking them. And you'll find it's actually pretty consistent at ranking. What I did here is I rotated which prompt was labeled A, B, or C. I did this through code programmatically. I also rotated the order of the prompts, whether one was shown first, second, or third. And also rotated, what examples were given in the prompt. And I found that as long as you're using GPT-4, it really consistently ranks the responses. So it is actually pretty good at self-criticizing. All right, so that is the 5 principles of prompting. That is how to make ChatGPT funny. Hopefully, you guys laughed a little bit. I know all your microphones are muted, so I'm just going to assume that you all were in uproarious laughter throughout the entire presentation, just for my own ego. But yeah, hopefully that kind of changed your worldview a little bit on what is possible with AI. And when someone tells you that ChatGPT can't do X, hopefully now you see that as a challenge rather than a reprieve from the automation that's coming for all of us. All right, so any questions, guys? I've got another minute or so. I can actually stay on a little bit after the session, although I know that a lot of you guys want to hop on to the next thing. So I think you can stay in this room a little bit. I'll endeavor to answer any questions that you have. Also, I'm going to share my Twitter here in the chat, so you guys can talk to me there if that's more convenient. Right. And if you get a chance, just want to check out, I actually have a course on prompt engineering on Udemy. It's specifically for people who code. That's what we're focused on. So, it's a lot about doing this at scale. So I'm applying the 5 principles, but then also you get a lot of, Jupyter notebooks and things like that to use in your own projects. So yeah, hopefully that's useful to you guys. And it's on Udemy if you have access to that, or you can buy the course individually. Yeah, so someone was asking, can you describe chaining in more detail? Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I can stay on here, I believe. So Ryan, I would say, chaining could be something as simple as copy and pasting the result into a new chat. And I would actually recommend that you do that first. I think as engineers, you can get a little bit too tempted to jump straight into code. But what I try and do is I do it manually a few times myself. And like even when I'm doing complex features, like if I'm using a vector database or doing some sort of lookups or whatever, I just simulate that first by like manually doing it, right? Like I'll like have a search, so if I have a browse agent like that can browse the web, I will just browse the web, but copy and paste the websites or the HTML into ChatGPT and then kind of see how it does, because you can get much closer fidelity when you do that. So I would say, yeah, you start with copy and pasting, but then typically in production, you would use something like LangChain, or you would build your own kind of custom chains where you would have a sequence of different prompts where the input or the output from the first prompt becomes the input for the second prompt. You can also have, it doesn't necessarily have to be a chain. You could also have an agent model where the agent decides which task to do next based on a task list. And that's a little bit more free form and therefore tends to go a little bit more crazy. It doesn't always work, at least right now. Not right now. Maybe when we get GPT-5. Cool. So yeah, hopefully that answered that question. So JD, you were asking how soon will your O'Reilly book be on the web? So I'm just gonna copy and paste this. So it is actually already there for like preview. So it's I think if you have access to O'Reilly or you'd want to do the free trial, you'll be able to like read what I have there already. It's already written actually just in editing right now. So so you should be able to get access to that, the pre-release. But yeah, I don't have a due date yet for my part is done in the next few months. So yeah, hopefully it'll be out early next year. All right, I think that's it then. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. Hopefully you enjoyed this session. I certainly enjoyed trying to get ChatGPT to tell jokes, and also enjoyed trying to get my wife to laugh at them. But she knew they weren't mine, of course. They were too good. So yeah, enjoy guys, and yeah, let me know about your own experiments that you run.